sort of cold. Oh, well remembered. So I may have to put myself on mute from time to time to blow my nose or have a sip of tea. So please bear with me during all of that. So welcome to my talk, which is how to ensure autistic pupils stop attending school, and maybe what to do about it. And this is genuinely my title. I've had lots of people write to me to say, are you sure? I think you mean how to make sure they don't stop attending. It is genuinely the title that I intended to have. And there may be people in the room who, I've just showed this to Rebecca actually, who are familiar with this book, which is by Dr. Damien Milton and Professor Richard Mills, 10 Rules to Ensure That Your Child with Learning Disabilities or Autism has Challenging Behaviour. So it's a nod to them, and you'll see where I'm going with this format as we go through. I think it's also something to bear in mind is that, you know, all of us, either whether we're parents or in education or in working in social care, we all have, hopefully, all have the best of intentions, but sometimes the things that we do have unintended outcomes and consequences. So that's part of what I'm asking you to think about today. So I regard myself, I suppose, a bit like an expert by experience, but also by design. I'm a teacher by background, so an educational background. I taught for about 10 years. And then I became a parent. I've got 2 children. I've got the little girl you can see in front of you in that lovely picture there. She's 17 now, so some time ago since that was taken, but obviously since she's a teenager, we're only getting the small photos now. And I always have a photograph of her because she reminds me why I do what I do. You know, there is a reason for it, and there is a good reason for it. I also have a neurotypical or a predominant neurotype son. And I am currently a director and associate consultant at an organisation called At Autism. We're a training and consultancy organisation. And I'm a visiting research fellow at the University of Southampton. ACORN stands for the Autism Community Research Network. And a bit like my daughter, I am autistic, and I also have a diagnosis of ADHD. So I have my primary diagnosis as autism. My daughter, she was diagnosed at the age of 5, and I was diagnosed shortly afterwards. I've never really thought about or heard about autism before that. So a little bit about me, and I think it's really important, not just that I share with you what's informed my thinking and what brings me to give you the presentation I do today, but that also you think about the knowledge and experiences that you bring today. What have you previously heard about autism? What are the connections, the personal connections you have to autism, and how does that inform your understanding of absenteeism? I think somebody's got their mic on, by the way. Oops. So recognising the impact of our background is really important because what we bring with us, our current knowledge, our past experiences, either as a parent or as an autistic person herself, or as somebody who works with autistic children, young people, or possibly all of those things, all of that shapes our understanding of autism. It's our current understanding of autism, and it also shapes our attitudes towards autistic children, young people. I'm pretty sure that having an autistic daughter, having an autistic child, means that sorry, I'm just distracted by the background noises. I'm not able to filter out noise, so
it should be muted now, I think.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you very much. So the fact that I have an autistic daughter, that influences how I think, doesn't it? It can't help but influence how I think, and therefore how I respond and interact with other autistic young people. Being an autistic parent means I can't help but have a different perception of what it's like to be an autistic parent or an autistic teacher, for example. And all of these different things that we bring impacts on our interactions with autistic children and young people, and our assessment of their strengths and their needs, and of course of the support that we then go on to offer. So what I'm going to do today is go through some rules of what schools could do, or what parents could do, in order to make or to ensure that autistic children and young people stop attending school. So rule number 1, make assumptions about what I need because I'm autistic. Give every autistic child or young person the same support strategy, whether they need it or not. So this is saying that, you know, particularly I think in a busy environment like a school, there isn't a great deal of autism training. Perhaps you only got it if you're a teacher when you were on your training course, whenever that your initial teacher training. Maybe have an hour a year. Maybe the person who gave you the training wasn't really providing you with up-to-date knowledge of autism. We come away maybe, and maybe as parents who don't know anything about autism, we latch onto some common strategies. Maybe we fall into the trap of thinking there is a one-size-fits-all, that autistic people somehow are a monolith and we all need the same things, we all have the same issues, and we all need the same supports. And the example here is ear defenders. And I know in schools that's often a common strategy, isn't it? Give everybody ear defenders and they'll be fine. Some autistic children will not wear them for all sorts of reasons. They might not want to wear them because they don't actually have hypersensitive hearing. I do. They may not want to wear them because it makes them stand out, for example. So giving everybody that strategy might make you as a professional or as a parent or as a carer feel that you kind of ticked the strategy box, but actually you haven't. What you've done is made an assumption about what that young person needs based on the fact that they're autistic. So the lesson here is, first of all, don't make assumptions. And secondly, remember that everybody's unique, everybody is an individual, and that's no different for autistic people. We're all unique individuals as well. And what works for one autistic person won't necessarily be the preferred strategy or the most helpful strategy for another autistic person. So part of keeping an autistic child in school in a way that they will thrive, not just survive, is to actually provide them with strategies that are going to be helpful to them and are going to help them to thrive in school. In order to do that, one of the things we should do is listen to the autistic young people that we have in schools, or indeed if you're a parent, because I know we've got a mixed audience here. I don't know, Rebecca, if you can get a show of responses in the chat bar. Can you put in the chat bar whether you are school staff, whether you're a parent carer, or whether you are in some other capacity, just so we can get a feel as we go through for who's what. So this image actually is by one by my daughter. She provides a lot of the artwork for my slides, and here she's putting on a smile. She's pretending to be fine. We can make assumptions that autistic children are fine if they are quiet, and it's only by asking them that we find out what we need to know. That doesn't mean that we ask them necessarily using spoken words. Maybe communication with autistic children and young people happens in a very different way. And I've done some research previously where some of the participants much preferred to communicate with me via text, for example, via the keypad through text-based services such as Skype Messenger, rather than actually having conversations using the spoken word. So there are different ways of gathering the thoughts and feelings and needs of autistic children and young people. And certainly, I remember doing one piece of a lecture to some PGCE students, so people who were training to be teachers, and somebody said, I've tried asking that autistic young person what they think and what they need in school, and I sat them down in front of me and said, look at me and tell me what it is you need. And they didn't say anything at all. So I went and got my head of year, and they sat down next to me, and we both looked at the person and we said, right, tell me what it is you need. And they still said nothing. And I said, well, actually, what you've just done there is doubled up the pressure on that autistic person to communicate in a way that's probably not their preference. So that's not the way to do it. But there's a quote at the bottom there. When you see these quotes, I'll tell you who they're from, but this is from one of the girls in my study who said, to find, if you want to find out what we need, just ask us. It's not rocket science. There is nothing complicated about it. You just need to find out the best way for us to communicate. Rebecca, have you got any feedback for me on the sort of people we've got in the room?
Yes, so quite a lot of parents, a mixture of autism teachers, college staff, local authority, quite a few from schools, ELSA, advisory teachers. Yeah, so kind of mixed, but quite a few parents.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much. And one of the ways that you can find out what people think is by using an activity. I always think it's easier to talk, if you want people to talk, by getting them to do an activity as well. And this one is based around the idea of the ideal school exercise, which is beloved of lots of educational psychologists. It's available. I've adjusted it slightly with my own couple of categories. The idea is that you ask people about tell me about the sort of school you do not want to go to. And you ask them to do about, for example, what will the school be called, or what will school look like? How will you be like? What will you be like in this school? And then you ask them questions about what is your ideal school? What would that be like? So the same questions, but different scenario. I use slightly different questions. So, what is the ethos of the school? The different colours here on this example relate to those different categories. So ethos was the one in grey. So we did this example with the individual, and then I asked them to diamond rank their top 9 recommendations for their ideal school. So then the top one tended to be the ethos of the school. That was really, really important. And one that would focus on student well-being came out top for this particular young person. Okay, so you can have also do photo voice. You can get somebody to walk around the school with a camera, on a phone or an actual camera, take photographs of places that you feel comfortable. Where do you feel safe? Where do you feel like you belong? Where do you feel happiest? You don't need to do the places where you don't feel happy, because you can work that out by process of deduction. All of these things can help us work out what are the things that are going to help this child to thrive. And be curious. That was that point at the bottom. What's one of the recommendations for the girls as well? Don't just make assumptions. Don't just note that something's happened. Be curious. Find out why. I put a couple of Padlets in this presentation, and because I'm quite rubbish at timekeeping. It must be my ADHD thing. I'm a bit time blind. We may not have time to do it fully, but are you able to copy that, Rebecca, from the slide, or do I need to actually stop sharing in order to do that?
Yeah, you'd need to get it from your slides.
Okay, so let's just do that. I'll pop it in the... Because one of the things that I'd like people to think about is collaboration. And, oh, here we go. I'll go back to the slides again now. And by collaboration, so I've talked about the autistic, listen to the voice of the child, but it's also really, really important that schools and parent carers also collaborate and find ways and systems to collaborate together. And one of the really difficult things, I think, for schools and for parents is that parents can go in with one perspective, and schools have got a very different perspective. The thing that schools have, though, is that it's their environment. And if we're not careful, you can end up with a situation where there's almost like a power play going on, because teachers are feeling quite protective of the fact it's where they work, it's what they've been trained to do, it's, you know, they have their own sets of rules. And parents have to come in with their own different, equally valid perspective. And yet there can be a real battle there for power and understanding, and a real barrier to actually active, respectful collaboration. And one of the things I'd like everybody to think about, either now or later, because we'll keep the Padlet open for 24 hours, and it's all anonymous, so you don't worry, you can just post your thoughts onto that board. How do we establish authentic, respectful collaboration between home and school? Because one of the key things we know about children who stop attending school is that the perspective between home and school is often different. So how do we learn from each other? How do we share those messages in a respectful way that doesn't prioritise the views of school over those of parents, but actually gets everybody to work together holistically? That's really, really important.
Just to jump in there, because I haven't used Padlet before, so if you're not sure how to add to it, there's a purple button in the bottom right hand corner that you can click on and then add any comments or paste pictures and things.
Perfect, thank you very much. It should be fairly self-explanatory. Just literally click the link and have a play. Rule number 2, base my support needs on my conduct or my achievement. And the reason I put that up there is because we're talking about absenteeism today more than exclusion. And I say that because exclusion, we tend to think more about formal exclusion. And I want to contrast that with absenteeism. And you don't necessarily get the same issues with schools complaining about challenging behaviour, so-called behaviours of concern, which is difficult then if we're going to start thinking about support needs. What do you do if you have if your system as a school for providing limited resources and limited when we know that everybody's really pushed? What do we do when your system is based on conduct or an achievement? So if you have, for example, a child who is meeting academic targets or maybe exceeding academic targets, if they are conforming, if they are regarded almost as the ideal pupil, what is going to need to happen for that child to be noticed or for that child to be provided with some support if they are actually struggling in other ways, if they're struggling to attend school? What will need to happen for you to notice that at school? And what needs to happen? What do you need to hear from home in order to get that information earlier? Because we know that if you wait until a child is persistently absent from school before you offer help, then it's probably going to be too late to create all sorts of other problems. So we need to make sure wherever possible we can get that support in place earlier on. So one of the things here I've noted is internal absences. Schools, are you keeping track of those? Are you noting those internal absences? We are going to come back to that a bit later on. Some of the things that autistic young people tell us is the impact of the sensory environment, the overwhelming environment. Are you picking up those messages about the sensory input? Are you picking up any messages about daily microaggressions? And by that I mean things that maybe you wouldn't rate as particularly difficult or particularly hard or particularly traumatic, but that if they are happening every day can actually build up, can accumulate. Are you picking up difficulties with sleep? We know that autistic children and young people struggle with sleep. We don't know completely how to manage that yet, but we do know that your traditional sleep hygiene schedules don't work. So are you picking up messages around that? If a child is coming into school exhausted and tired, it may not be because they've been up all night playing on the Xbox. It may be because they genuinely struggle to sleep. Are they anxious? Are they highly anxious? Are these different signs that you could be looking out for? And I think part of the thing we need to remember is that even if we can't see external signs of distress at school, perhaps through sensory overwhelm, they'll still be having an impact if a child is dysregulated by too much sensory input, even if they internalize it. So they will still be feeling the impact of that. You just won't be able to see it. And that's really important. That tends to happen more at school. So if somebody's internalizing that distress at school, it may be that the impact is felt always on the young person, but often also at home. And that's important because, of course, schools won't see that, will they? Schools will see a very different perspective. So how do we share those perspectives in a way that is, again, respectful and provides that young person with dignity? So what is the impact? Are we basing support needs on the impact of the teacher? Are we basing support needs on the impact of her peers or his peers? Is it based on impact on the family? And what are the implications of those things on whether support is made, appropriate support is offered to that young person? Rule number 3. That's supposed to be a little diagram of an exit pass. One of those strategies that tends to be offered to most autistic children, young people in school, and as a short-term measure to preserve dignity. I think it's really, really helpful. If you are feeling in a situation where you think you're going to be overwhelmed, being able to leave that environment to go somewhere to decompress and regulate again is really, really important. That's great. The problem is if you then, as a teacher or a parent, you don't follow up and find out why they've had to leave. Because if that's what you do, you're basically saying, come back when you feel better, but I'm not interested in why you needed to leave. So you're saying effectively that the problem is within the child. The child is dysregulated in your class, so they could leave, yes. And when they've sorted themselves out, they can come back. Come back when you feel better, might be a phrase that you might hear. Come back when you feel you can manage. Okay, right, so what are you changing about what's happening in your classroom? If you don't change anything, guess what's going to happen? They are going to get dysregulated again, right? So that fits into more of a medical understanding of, that's a very simplistic drawing here, but like a medicalized understanding of disability, that the problem is located within the child, and if only we could fix the child, then everything would be fine. On the right hand side, you've got an image of somebody with barriers outside of them, so looking for external barriers. And if we take that one stage further, if somebody needs to leave our classroom, we might at a later stage follow up to find out, okay, I noticed that you had to leave my class a couple of days ago. What was going on there? Is there anything I can do to help? How can I support you in my lesson? And maybe it's something as simple as, I can't stand sitting in the middle of the class. I really would like to sit by the door. It would make me feel safer. That's an external barrier that the teacher can then do something about. And I have had teachers say to me, well, that's a load of rubbish. I've never heard of an autistic child that needs to sit next to a safe person, a person they trust. How ridiculous. Which is odd, because I would say that's one of the key things you can do in school, is to sit them next to somebody that they feel they can trust. Again, as an example of I've heard power issues around there, because teachers will say, we have the seating plans for a reason, and they need to sit in these particular places. And I would say that's a really small thing you can change. And if that helps that child stay in your class, consider whether it's actually worth doing, because that might be. So having a trusted person to be with is a really important factor. So it's about following up and finding out, not immediately afterwards when they're probably still dysregulated, but at some point, so that you're saying, I hear you had a problem and I'm interested in finding a solution with you if we can. It also brings in this interesting thing about, how do people interpret absence as a strategy? So if staff are using an exit pass and saying, yes, you can have an exit pass, and you can leave when you're starting to feel overwhelmed, you're kind of almost saying absence is an acceptable strategy when you're feeling overwhelmed. If the girls, I put by the girls because this was actually done from the research that I did, so the autistic girls or boys use absence as a strategy, is the message the same? Is it equally acceptable? Generally not. And yet the message that they would have internalized, if you forever say you can leave if you're feeling overwhelmed and you don't do anything about it, is that when you're feeling overwhelmed, you need to leave, and you need to sort it out yourself, because I'm not going to find out what it is you need. So I think it's really important that we think about the messages we send through our actions, intentional or not. Absolutely, exit passes, as I say, has a really important part to play. Think about the internalized messages that you're giving. Rule number 4, listen to my concerns and then do nothing about them. So one of the things that came through from some of the research that I did was that people would, some of the young girls would, so I was working with teenage girls for this particular piece of research, they would say that they were pretty much all of them bullied at school, at different schools that they attended. And we know that autistic children are far more likely to be bullied, persistently bullied, than non-autistic children. So a lot of them would say to me, so I did tell a teacher, but nothing was done about it. And one of the problems there, of course, is that, again, if you are struggling to be in school for whatever reason, perhaps because you're bullied, if you tell somebody in authority that you're being bullied and you need help, and then nothing is done, the message again there is we go back to that previous slide, which is, okay, so I've told somebody, nothing's been done, I've been told to ignore it or to deal with it or to be more resilient, so nothing's going to be done to help me. So I either carry on experiencing the bullying on a daily basis, or I stop going to school. And that can be literally the outcome, because if the people who are supposed to look after you and support you and stop bad things happening, if they don't or they can't do that, then don't be surprised if people stop going to school. It sounds like it's very straightforward, and it is. It's not a straightforward thing to fix, but that is the ultimate outcome of a strategy like that. And I think one of the problems we need to think about here are the tensions that are created within school systems relating to agency. So within schools, we know that of necessity, of course, teachers are the ones that hold the power. Of course, it would be, we're not advocating chaos here. We're not advocating anarchy of everybody just doing what they like. But if staff are too focused on getting young people, autistic young people, to conform and work to reduce their agency, whereas young people are not having their needs met and therefore need to have things changed and things in place in order to cope with being in school, and seek to increase their agency, maybe, for example, by instead of going on the playground at lunchtime, eating their lunch in the toilets. And then that creates all sorts of issues. Teachers will be saying, oh, you can't be eating your lunch in the toilets, you need to go on the playground, you're damaging your social skills. It creates all sorts of tensions, and that in itself creates problems. So yes, that there's the idea here that if you're not meeting needs, then the young person will try and meet the needs themselves. But then teachers may object to them meeting their own needs because they're not doing what everybody else is doing. And I think one of the problems we have with our school system, and this is obviously out of the hands of everybody, unless you're in government here today, is that idea that actually some schools really are quite rigid, and there is a real desire for children to behave and to be dressed and to act in the same way, pretty much the same way, a real desire for conformity, which leaves very little flexibility in the system to meet the needs that fall outside of that. And by that, for example, I'm thinking of things like uniforms. The number of young people who struggle to attend schools when maybe it's PE, because they hate the feel of the PE kit, for example. But they're told they need to wear those particular items of clothing because that's part of the uniform.
Sorry, Ruth, somebody had just asked in the chat what you meant by agency in that previous slide. Okay, so agency, I suppose, is about having some sort of control over and direction over what you do. So in some situations, so using the example of a girl called Daisy, who I'm going to talk about in a moment. So she was and it's not her real name, none of the names are real names. She was badly bullied at school. She took to eating her lunch in the toilets. That was her way of taking some control over the situation, if you like, having some agency, finding that corner of agency for herself. She wasn't given it, she took it. And then she was actually found by an English teacher who said, this is ridiculous, you can't eat your lunch in the toilets, eat your lunch in the classroom with me. Great.
Also might be a safeguarding issue, I don't know, but but nevertheless she took her out of the, and then the safeguarding lead from the school was walking on the corridor and said, you can't be in this classroom, you need to be out on the playground, you're damaging your social skills. So an example there actually of both teachers having good intentions, I'm sure, but one stopping to find out why they were eating their lunch on the side, and the other one thinking that because they were autistic, they ought to be on the playground practicing the social skills with people who bullied her so badly that they threw her lunch in the bin. All of these different things become obvious if we just take a little bit of time. But yeah, so in that case, the safeguarding lead took control of the situation, said, no, you can't do that. You can't find a safe space to eat your lunch. You have to go and do this. Is that a bit clearer? Yeah. Okay, so Daisy, one of the things that we did was we looked at what had gone wrong for these girls at school, and also what worked, what helped. And these are 3 really positive events that Daisy picked out that I want to share with you. So you'll see a little bit later on the exercise that I did with the girls. It was basically creating a life chart on a very, very simple template where I asked girls to think about the positive experiences and the events of significance and in their school histories, and they could be positive or negative. And then we found themes in their life stories, and we also identified 3 negative events that didn't work for them, and what went wrong, what could the schools have done differently, and 3 positive events. Why were they successful? What was good about them? And these were Daisy's. So the first thing that was positive for her was starting music lessons. And I think this idea of focusing on positive experiences is really important, because so often we take a deficit view, don't we, on everything. That didn't work. Why didn't that work? What can we change? And whilst that's important, it's also really important to think about what helps, because as adults, that's what we do, isn't it? We think about what are the positives, what are the good things, what are the strengths, where do we want to focus our interest and our attention. So Daisy fell in love with music, and she was absolutely passionate about music. Every time I saw her, she just wanted to share her absolute passion for music. And what was amazing for her is that she felt like she was good at something for the first time, which was amazing. And she felt like she was given the same opportunities. She felt like she was treated like an equal, and that was a really important thing for her. She hadn't felt that before. And that ties in, doesn't it, to those themes and those ideas of belonging. Am I good enough? Do I fit in? Do I belong here? So it also became a way for her to cope with the rest of the things that were happening in her life. Unfortunately, she wasn't allowed to take music at GCSE level, so she was 15 when I met her, because the music teacher knew she was autistic and didn't feel she'd be able to cope with the noise. Another example of somebody having the best of intentions, but actually not stopping to have that conversation with her. I think she developed her love of music when she was about 8 or 9, if I remember properly. So it was a well-established passion. Had she been able to take that music GCSE, had she been able to have that focus through those years, that might have helped her to stay on and thrive in school, or at least give her the ability to manage some of those other more difficult moments. It would give her those boosts. And also, it would have helped her well-being. The second one was meeting a teacher who believed in her, and that was the teacher that found her in the toilets eating her lunch, and was actually responsible for meaning she could stay in mainstream for as long as she did. She understood my difficulties, she didn't ignore my strengths, and she gave me a safe space to hide and express my feelings and feel valued. And there's something there, isn't there, about validation, about being heard, about being seen. And I think a lot of our autistic children, young people who stop attending, those who internalise, they don't feel seen, and they don't feel cared for, they don't feel valued, they don't feel heard. And And that's something that's actually a really important element to attending. If we don't feel like somebody cares about us, if we don't feel like anybody's going to notice, then that's going to help us not to go. So there's something there about how do we do that? How do we change that? How do we make people feel seen? And you know, there was another girl who'd been in school and she hadn't had her name said to her in 3 weeks other than in the register. You think, you know, that's a small thing we can do. We can change that, can't we? We can change these small things. And the third one was dropping French and PE. And this may not be a surprise to parents in the room today. PE is a pretty common one for people not liking, all sorts of reasons. We've got the PE uniform, we've got the transitions, we've got the changing rooms, we've got the sensory input, we've got not being picked, we've got not maybe overlapping with dyspraxia. There are all sorts of possible reasons. And languages tend to be, people either love them or hate them. But again, for her, for Daisy, it was about sensory overload. And being able to drop those 2 lessons meant that when she was in school, she was able to use more of her energy, or the energy that she had was able to sustain her much better than having some of it or a lot of it used up in these highly stressful situations, these 2 subjects that she was not interested in, was not going to do again after GCSE, but would help her to stay in school for longer to do some of those other core subjects. So for her, it was a really positive thing to drop those 2 sessions. Any questions on that before I move on? Okay, rule number 5, ensure I get no break from high levels of sensory input, and make sure you wear plenty of aftershave or perfume. So I've taken this lovely photograph of an old school corridor here. And already I can imagine my ears are ringing at the very thought of just 2 people being in that corridor, let alone 100. So when we think about school environments, but also home environments or transitioning to school environments, very, very busy, noisy environments. So it may be the actual volume of noise, it may be the multiple noises. So I mentioned before about, for me, I can't filter out noises. If there's one noise, it all just blends and merges, and I can't pick out the sentences or the instructions given to me by one person talking to me. It actually freezes and I can't think about anything. I can't think about what I'm going to say. But it's not just noises, it's also, you can be hypersensitive to touch, to light touch. So if somebody's brushing past you in a corridor, that can be really dysregulating. It can be the smell of somebody's shampoo or the coffee on their breath that can be dysregulating, or the food that they've brought in for lunch or in the canteen. It can be you know, the way the light's coming through the windows, or the blinds are shimmering, or the overhead lights are flickering, or they're just too bright. You know, one of the things so you can imagine just coming in from home to school, coming into a corridor like this, and many autistic people would be dysregulated within a few minutes of being in an environment like that. So even getting into school can be tricky, partly for the transition, but partly because that immediate environment can be very, very difficult. And I know that sometimes we might stagger entrances and exits to school, but bear in mind as well how this environment can impact on a child through the day. And we all know, I think about the cognitive effect, yes. So think about those moments of dysregulation, either through sensory input or challenging social interactions. Somebody, for example, maybe the teacher's giving you like 6 instructions all at once, so you've got that going on, you've got your sensory input going on, you've been told to work in a group but nobody has any instructions about who has what role, so that doesn't make any sense. It's very easy to see how somebody could quickly become dysregulated. Okay. Let me stop sharing. Oh, no, I can do it from here, I think. Right. I'm going to now share a short animation with you. This was we made this with a girl called Erin Davidson with Donaldson Trust a couple of years ago. It's called Walk in My Shoes. It's freely available on YouTube. And it's based on a narrative that Erin wrote about her experience of school. And when I met her, she wasn't in school, so but she'd written it initially when she was still in school about the relentlessness and the difficulty of being in school for her. And I think it's a really useful watch, because one of the things that we all struggle with is to see something from somebody else's perspective. If you are autistic, you may relate to some of these things. If you have an autistic child or young person, again, you may relate to some of this. And again, if you're in school, you may actually think, that makes sense now, when you see some of these things as well. So I'm going to endeavour to play it. I can see you, Rebecca, so just give me a thumbs up if it's not working, okay? Oh.
What's it like to learn math on Brilliant.org? Brilliant gets you hands-on to help you learn by doing. Learn topics.
I think it's frozen now. We can't see anything moving.
I saw myself dealing with it all on my own. I feel like the walls are closing in on me. I convinced myself to do what I've always done.
It's just got the had the like preview of other videos. You're on mute as well. I don't know if you're saying anything important.
I'm going to share it in a different way.
Okay. Typical. It's fine when we tested it beforehand.
I think it's because I was trying to make it bigger.
Oh.
Okay, let's try again. Is that okay?
So yeah.
I saw myself dealing with it all on my own. I feel like the walls are closing in on me. I convinced myself to do what I've always done, walk through the pain, deal with it silently. I start to tremble, my eyes starting all over the place. I begin to struggle to breathe. I'm doing all I can. Again, I was all alone. I had to push through and get to class.
Can you tell me about how you felt when you were walking to school in the morning?
There was dread, fear. I was really shaky, and I'd always get kind of hyper aware of everything that was around me. So I'd be really distracted by everything I walked past and every little kind of movement.
What led up to you feeling that sense of dread and fear as you approached school?
Maybe the fact that I was getting closer to it. I think it got worse. I think I was just kind of oh no. Everything just kind of crashed down and there was this huge weight on you. There's always going to be something really busy going on. Whether people were in the classes already or not, there was always somebody else in the corridors, and the corridors weren't exactly huge. I think it was kind of claustrophobic as well. The walls would always feel like they were kind of closing in, and I always felt like everyone around me would be staring at me, and I was kind of hyper aware still, and just be aware of everything that was happening around me. and that could get really overwhelming. It would definitely trigger my anxiety to like a whole other level, and I would get very shaky, and I would hold on to inhaler, because often when I panicked it would trigger an asthma attack, so inhaler was kind of important. So being trapped in a room was kind of like being trapped in like a cage with a whole bunch of things that like really scare you surrounding you. In busy corridors, I would try and make my way through the crowd and towards the wall, and then I would just kind of back up against the wall until the crowd passed and try and keep to myself. Withdrawing meant less attention, and the least attention I got, the more I felt okay. I think they would just see me as calm and trying to do my work or focusing, and not really see that I am struggling.
So you can see them,
Yeah, but they can't see me.
but they can't see you.
Yeah.
And how did you describe that?
One-way mirror.
So it feels like
A one-way mirror. I can't speak. Oh, jeez. It's kind of like being a ghost, I feel like. Like, I can see everything happening around me, but they really can't see me. And they're like pushing into you and crowding around you and thing, and I'm just kind of there, but not there. So yeah, ghost. I think in lessons, things that overwhelmed me was an overload of information. I would take in all the information from the whole thing, and everything would jump out at me because I think everything was really important, and I would never be able to just pick out certain facts. So I am taking in all the information from everything all the time. There is no filter. I used the distractions of fidgeting and doodling as a filter. I would focus on the distraction I got from pens, twisting pens through my fingers. I think the noise of the pen kind of rattling or hitting off the desk would be a good one for noise, and focusing on the movement I need to make to keep the pen spinning. At the end of the day, I'd be so exhausted and terrified that it would affect my sleep cycle. I'd fall asleep maybe out of exhaustion, but then I'd wake up before I should actually be going to bed. So I would maybe fall asleep really, really late and wake up early in the morning so I can get ready for school and be super tired, which would make the feeling of like dread and fear more intense, I guess, because I've had that lack of sleep. The feeling of dread I would have that night would be because the next day I knew I would have to repeat the same day again without anything changing, because other people or myself would have the lack of understanding or the lack of support that we all kind of needed, as well as myself. The feeling of isolation at school was, well, crushing, I think, because I could be surrounded by people and still be entirely alone.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about autism now. What does being autistic mean to you?
To me, being autistic means that I think a little differently than everybody else, and I may struggle with certain aspects. Like, I personally struggle with feelings, but I have like certain strengths that may be another person's weakness, and I can use that to help me. And I kind of like my hyper awareness, because let me overload me sometimes. It's a security blanket, because then I know what everything's happening, and I like to know things. I like to have an understanding of things.
If you could teach one thing about you and autism, what would it be?
If I could teach someone one thing about autism as a whole, it would be that nobody is exactly the same. There's no stereotypes, there's no specific things. It's like there's common things, and there's things that can be completely unique to a person, and to bunch all of us together in one box just doesn't make sense. And so it's a way to get, I think, everybody kind of, to understand someone, you need to know them first. To help them with strategies, you need to know them first. You need to know what gives them anxiety, what they like, what they don't like, what textures they like, what textures they don't like, and just like the subtle things that nobody else would notice, to just help bring out and to be aware of, so that you know when maybe they're struggling, or maybe when they're about to break.
Okay, so from that animation, hopefully you found it interesting to watch. All of the artwork there was done by people who attended Junction 10 at Donaldson Trust. So lots of other autistic children, young people contributed the effects to that animation. And I think some of the messages that came out of that we've touched on already were things like that the idea of days repeating and going through the same things over and over again, with the idea that nothing's going to change and nothing will be done. And I think we can all appreciate that, you know, that idea that hopelessness and the exhaustion that you must feel if that's your experience of school, that you have to go through that every day and that nothing will change. And that feeling of isolation, I think, again, was really powerful, isn't it? When she says it was crushing, I feel that for her. I feel how hard that must be, to be in a whole environment full of other people and to feel so alone. Are really, really powerful things. Now, after the break, we're going to talk more about some more different rules and about masking as well. But I think we're going to take, if we're going to take a 10-minute break, Rebecca, is that okay? We'll come back at 5 past, everybody, if that's okay.
Okay, lovely.
Thank
You
you.
can just stay logged in and just come back to the same screen.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm a minute early. Amanda's ready.
Yeah.
Hi, Rebecca.
Back.
I'm back early. I'm saying hello to Amanda because she's got her camera on so I can
Aw.
see her. I know she's there. It's nice. It's nice to see her on the face, isn't it?
Yeah, makes you feel like you're not just talking to yourself.
Always helpful. Hi, Rachel. Rachel's waving. Lovely.
Oh,
Okay, we're now 5 past, so let's get going again. Thank you. Hope you've all had a chance to stretch your legs, grab a coffee and a biscuit. So rule number 6. blame my parents for any behaviours of concern at home or at school. That way you do not need to feel responsible and could justify not making any changes to your own behaviour. I put that one in. Parents will like that one, teachers not so much. Really to remind us about, and as a next teacher, hopefully you can appreciate that I do feel for you. It's to remind us that just because we see a different picture doesn't mean that the picture we see is the full picture. It's a picture. It doesn't mean that because we see a child in class who appears to be fine, that there is nothing going on that we need to be concerned about. And if the child is having a meltdown at home, it doesn't mean that the issue is a result of something that's happening in the home. It could be the result of something that's happening in school. Does that make sense? It's about not making assumptions about what's causing that distress. Just because we don't see something doesn't mean there isn't something to think about. We need to be curious. When we get a different message or somebody shares a different perspective, the most important thing we can do is say, oh, that doesn't fit with my perspective. I'm going to look into that. I'm going to be curious. I'm going to investigate, rather than let our unconscious bias creep in and go, well, she's fine in my class, it must be a problem at home. We need to avoid those rushes to judgment and take it whenever I come across something where it doesn't seem to make any sense, or there's a mixed picture. I use that as a little flag to me to go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that is. There's a reason there that I need to investigate. And that takes away all the blame from anybody. It just says, let's work together on creating that fuller picture and trying to work out what's going on without judgment, without blame, but in the spirit of collaboration, which is what I want us to think about on that first Padlet. Because one of the things that if you internalize your distress at school, you tend to see people who externalize. They're the ones that you really see if they're distressed and they melt down in school. There's a clear evidence of distress there, often called a behavioural issue, but generally the result of an unmet need or overwhelm. If you're internalizing that or masking that or camouflaging that can be equally problematic, because it can be difficult to see. You know, if you've got a big class of children or multiple classes of children, how are you going to spot the ideal pupil? How are you going to spot the child who is compliant, who is eager to please, who is the perfectionist? How are you going to see there's something potentially that they are in distress, right? So that's why we need to have these other viewpoints being brought in, because masking can be quite damaging. It's a sign of, it's often a response to trauma. You hide if you have experienced pain and trauma and stigmatizing by peers, by teachers, by parents, carers, by other people in the community, by wherever it's from. So it can be a response to the social world. In my daughter's school, for example, her secondary school, and her school is not alone. Her peers used autistic as an insult, as a swear word. So if you are experiencing that, you are going to do what you can not to be that person, not to look like that person. You want to internalize those difficulties or any autistic traits. It's stigma. It leads to those attempts to conceal, to hide, to not be picked on, to pass as normal, wherever normal means. and to hide any autism-related difficulties. So the other thing to note, of course, it's not just limited to autistic females. It's not female autism. Autism is autism. It's more about internalizing. That's what we're thinking about. So males and females can mask. It's just that we tend to see it. We think we see it more in autistic females. But it's a response to trauma. Implications for support, of course, if you don't see it, then maybe if we think about our unconscious bias, our judgments that we make, we are less likely to support them. Now, these are quotes from teachers and Senkos about autistic girls who had been diagnosed as autistic. So they had already got a clinical diagnosis of autism. And these are quotes from people some school staff. I see nothing. I don't have to cope with anything. And there again, we go back to that earlier slide about impact. Who does it impact? Are we saying that if it doesn't have an impact on us as a parent or us as a teacher, then there's nothing there? Because it's still having an impact on the child. We have children with more needs. How are you assessing that? Are you assessing it on the impact on you? Are you assessing it on the fact that you can't see anything? Because again, that's going to lead to all sorts of problems, because that child may still have needs. Just because you can't see them, as my daughter says here, doesn't make it any less real. So there are implications there for autistic children, young people who mask in school. It's more difficult to spot when they're in distress. So how do we find out? And that's really, really important. That's why collaboration is really important. And I include the autistic child or young person in that. And we know that masking has a really negative impact on mental health. So I'm going to issue a trigger warning here, because I'm going to talk about some things that are a bit distressing. We know that masking leads to physical and so switch the sound off if you need to at this point. And when I move on to the next slide, you'll know that I've stopped talking about it. So I'll just give people a moment to switch off the sound if they need to. So we know that a study in Denmark, from the whole population study in Denmark, that it's five times higher than for, sorry, the impact on, excuse me. Let me go back to a different study. So there's somebody called Sarah Cassidy who works at the University of Nottingham. She's done a lot of work into autistic mental health and suicide. And she found that if autistic people are having to mask their autism, which most behaviourist approaches teach them to do, well, conforming, making children conform, then their risk of suicide rises. And we know from the Denmark study that I was mentioning that by the age of 25, over 60% of autistic women were diagnosed with a psychiatric condition. And over 22% were in inpatient services for a psychiatric condition. We know from a study by Autistica that autistic children are 28 times more likely than their peers to think about or attempt suicide. And we know that camouflaging predicts suicidality in autistic people. So knowing that masking as a response to trauma should actually really, when we know we have an autistic child in our class, or as a parent we know we have an autistic child, someone who internalizes that distress through masking, we know they are going to be at an elevated risk for self-harm and suicidal behaviour, suicidal ideation. We know there's a risk of loss of identity because you're trying to fit in and be somebody who you're not, maybe try to mirror the personality or the makeup of the group you're with. We know it's going to be the result of trauma and therefore probably unresolved pain. We know that autistic people self-medicate through alcohol, through drugs. And we know it has an impact on poor mental health. But you know, at the worst case scenario, it increases your risk of suicide. I think if you are an autistic female without intellectual impairment, your risk is like 13 times greater, 13 times greater. So again, really, really important that we have these spaces and these processes of communicating openly and without judgment and without prejudice, to make sure that autistic children, young people who internalise distress are picked up early, and that we work together to find out why that's happening before they stop attending school. Okay. Rule number 7, make me feel like a burden. This ties into the previous slide. I'm not going to go into details, but it's about saying that we know that that word is linked to some of the things we talked about in the previous slide. And we also know that through research that this is a word that's used by teachers and SENCOs about children, presumably without the intention of them feeling that way. But I wonder if a teacher has a feeling that a child feels like a burden on the class, will the child know? Highly likely that they will feel that way. So rule number 7 is make me feel like a burden. Try limiting the number of questions I ask, or describing me as bossy or resistant or attention seeking. So one of the things that one of the girls said to me was, so we know that autistic people like to have clarity, need to have predictability, need to have clear instructions about what to do and how to do it. And if we are unsure or uncertain, then we may need to ask more questions, because we want to understand and want to make sure we get things right and do things in the right way. And one of the young people I spoke to had been told by their teacher that they were only allowed to ask 3 questions in each lesson. Presumably, with the best of intentions, that was the teacher saying, I need to have a process, because if I answer all your questions all the time, I won't have time to do everything else. Nevertheless, though, what that meant was this young person stopped asking questions and basically did nothing in those classes because didn't know what they were doing. So there was a breakdown there in terms of how to manage that need for certainty. So there have got to be different ways and better ways of doing that. Maybe it's a case of having the instructions by them on their desk, so they have those step-by-step instructions to go through on their own, so they can refer to that, and maybe have there are different things that we can do to manage that need for security and certainty without necessarily always having to ask the teacher. But by shutting that down, it's almost like saying, I'm not going to help you feel more secure, not going to help you feel safe with what you're doing. And that's problematic. And hopefully what you're hearing from this is that actually schools and teachers within schools, their intentions are great. Nobody goes into school, nobody goes into education because they don't care about educating children. So the intentions can be absolutely fine, but the outcomes, if we're not careful, can be quite the opposite of what they're intending. So a little diagram here to illustrate that. So the circles are kind of like what both people are thinking, that the autistic person and the school staff might be thinking the same thing about those green circles. And then on each circle we've got a pink speech bubble, which is the teacher, and we've also got the green thinking bubbles, which is the child, if that makes sense. So in the first one, they're both thinking, well, he should be able to cope with this piece. He should be able to manage this piece of work. But the boy's thinking, but I need help. The teacher's thinking, well, they should be able to manage, therefore they don't need any help. So I don't need to give that person any help. I don't need to offer any help. Another thought might be there are other children who are more deserving. And autistic people think that. I've had autistic children, young people say that to me. There are other children in the class with more needs, as well as teachers say that, as you've seen from one of the earlier quotes. So the child might feel like a burden. There are other children more deserving. I shouldn't be asking questions. I shouldn't be asking for help. And the staff member may be feeling that the child's a bit of a burden. And again, that's not helpful. And the outcome of that is that the child is encouraged not to ask for help, or the child doesn't feel like they can ask for help. So by not asking for help or not asking questions, then the teacher might think, oh, okay, so they're fine, they don't need any help. That's that's kind of reassured me that they're not asking for help. Whereas the autistic child might be thinking, I'm just going to mask that I don't understand this because I don't want to feel like a burden. I don't want, do you see what I mean? How that can become almost self-fulfilling. Rule number 8, tell me to be resilient, but don't do anything to help me. And I think this is one that I find particularly painful because I see this a lot in school reports about children. You know, they just need to be more resilient. And we think back to that slide about agency and about who has the ability to manage their support needs in class. Well, it's generally not the child. So what this is doing is almost saying, you've got to accept whatever we throw at you in school and whatever is thrown at you. So if you are being bullied, for example, or if you can't bear the sensory environment, well, that's just tough because we're not going to do anything about it and we're not going to let you do anything about it. So you're just going to have to bear it. And I think that's the reason it's particularly hard is because for a lot of autistic children, young people, they're already, the fact that they're in school shows a level of resilience that is quite incredible. And to keep going into school, as we saw from Erin's animation, knowing that it's going to be the same, is a level of resilience that is remarkable. So it's not a helpful comment. It can be quite offensive, actually. So I think we need to be really careful about, we can ask people to be resilient, but we can't ask them to be resilient on their own. And we can't ask them to be resilient unless we're going to give them some agency and some support. And that goes for home and school. So we need to take some action. And those of us in positions of authority or power, whether we're the parent or a member of school staff, we're the ones that need to lead on this, aren't we? We need to think, who will be a trusted ally for that young person in school? Who will help to create that connection, that safe person to talk to? Is it another young person? Can we make sure that they sit next to that person where they share a class with them, if that's going to work for both of them? Is there a particular teacher in a secondary school who gets on really well with that young person, who we can actually set up as a mentor, who can actually be that safe person to facilitate that communication? Where can we intercede earlier in the journey? And I'm going to show you a journey in a moment and I'll show you what I mean by that. What are the most appropriate forms of support for the individual? What are the small actions that we can all take to help that individual manage? It could be something as simple as moving where they sit in class. That could be all it needs to be. And how can we address different barriers to well-being? Rule number 9, prioritise my attendance over my well-being. And I just read in the chat earlier on during the break about somebody who's looking at different options for their child. And I think one of the things that I'm really conscious of for people who have a child that is struggling to attend school, and there are all sorts of words that we might use around that. So, for example, one of the things that Rebecca and I were talking about earlier was that EBSA, emotionally based school avoidance, and I really dislike that as a term because, again, it locates the problem within the child. If only the child could sort out their emotions, then they'd be in school. Job done. And so it goes back to that model I showed you, that really simple model of where does the problem sit? Is it within the child or are the barriers outside of the child? Do we call them a school refuser? Do we, where are we locating the problems? We come back to that again. So attendance, are we prioritising attendance over well-being? I think lots of schools have sent out messages about, if you're attending, things like little graphs of, if you attend X number of days, then you're more likely to get 5 GCSEs, and if you attend X number of days, you're probably more likely to get 8 GCSEs. And attending is really good; it helps you learn. All of these things which are completely meaningless, because we all know that schools are there to teach people how to pass exams, don't we? We all know schools are there to provide an education. If they're not in school, it's not because they don't know that going to school might actually help them get their exams. That's, you know, it's just a pointless thing to say. So it's about understanding that maybe there are other things going on. And I've said even better, give me a detention for arriving late. And there's something there about time that I want us to think about. So prioritising attendance over well-being is almost like, again, I'm not that fussed about what's going on with your well-being. You need to be in school. Now, that may not be the message the school's intending to send, but it will be a message that's internalised if you're not attending school because of your well-being. Do you see what I mean? So it's really important to think about that. Maybe it's better to think about a reduced timetable that is going to work for that young person, not a reduced timetable where they come in for the first 2 lessons of every day, because that's designed to meet the needs of the school, isn't it? But a reduced timetable maybe that says, okay, you've been out of school for a month or 2 months. Can you come into school and just do art? Because that's your favourite subject and you love your art teacher. And actually, whilst schools may be thinking, well, that's a bit rubbish, coming in just to do art, I would be thinking, well, that would be amazing. Imagine having a child not in school at all and then coming in school and actually be able to come in and just do something that they love and actually feel connected to it, initiate that connection through a subject and with a teacher that they feel connected to, that they're going to feel enabled, that they're going to feel confident about, that they're going to see what I mean. So it's about thinking, if attendance is important, what does that look like for that child? It's very usual for somebody to be able to attend school, certainly in this post-COVID era, for 100% of the year. So let's think a bit more about attendance. If somebody's not in school, what can we do to try and get them back in? And that might be one way forwards. I worked with one young person who did exactly that route. It may not work for everybody. It's just another suggestion. Remember, none of these work for everybody. And she actually went back to being full-time in school, apart from PE, from being not in school for 3 months. And her step up in hours was led by her. So she had a fortnightly meeting, team around the child meeting. She led. She said, right, next week I'm ready to move up and add in X subject or these 2 subjects. And that's how it worked. And that was really, really successful model for her. She felt in control, she felt in charge of, and that I think made that she made faster progress because it wasn't imposed on her, if that makes sense. And the time thing is really important because I remember this as a parent myself, actually, with my children at primary school. There's this big thing about, you've got to be on school on time, haven't you? It's really important to get to school on time, really important to get to school on time. And all that does is put huge amounts of pressure on people, parents included. Getting up in the morning, there might be all sorts of reasons why getting to school in the morning is stressful. If you are stressed about going to school, that is going to be even more stressful. So again, another example for you of somebody a child who wasn't going to school. This was a primary school child, autistic child, and the head said, just come in when you can. Get in when you can. Just say, get in when you can. And what that did was took all the pressure off the parent. Which then took pressure off the child because the child wasn't soaking it up from the parent. And so the child was getting in by maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. And some schools might be thinking, well, that's ridiculous. That's not a sustainable option, is it? It's not designed to be sustainable. It's designed to get your child used to going back into school. And of course, what happened was that child gradually started going earlier and earlier and earlier until she was back in school for the time that she should have been in school. It's about, I suppose, recognizing, everybody always thinks about the broken leg, don't the analogy? Well, if you had a broken leg, you wouldn't be walking up flights of stairs. Of course you wouldn't. You're not saying you're never going to be able to do stairs. Typically, you generally can do after a period of time. It's the same sort of thing about recognizing this is hopefully a short-term issue. Let's treat it as a short-term issue with a stepped approach in collaboration with a younger child, with the parent, of course. Yeah, but it was simply a matter of reducing the stress for the parent reduce the stress on the child. And they were able to work with the school. I mean, they had a fantastic head teacher who was like, I'm going to meet you at the gate when you come in. I'm going to help you over the threshold as part of that transition. And then you're going to sit in this lovely quiet area with a book and, you know, with a library. It's often in the library, isn't it, where people transition to school. And that all really helped. Detentions, by the way, some people really love them. I had one autistic girl who said she loved getting a detention because it was the only time school was quiet. So she actually did some work, so that's great. Okay, so prioritising well-being, ABC. We're not talking about behaviour, we're talking about acceptance, belonging and connection. And these are the things we need, that you need to be, not just to survive, but to thrive, okay? If a child is not wanting to go to school, these sorts of things need to be addressed. Do they feel accepted for who they are? Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel connected to anybody or anything in that school? And the autistic girls that I worked with said, and they all regarded themselves as academically able. They all had aspirations to go on and do different jobs, go to university, some of them, and so on. And they all said they wanted to be in a school that prioritised well-being over and above academic achievement, because learning follows good well-being. You can't think, you can't learn, you can't do anything if your mental health is rubbish, because you're just not there. So do our autistic children and young people feel safe? Do they feel cared about? And how do we build relationships? How do we start those relationships? Is it something as simple as saying hello to them by name when they come into our classroom? Is it knowing that their particular passion is playing the violin? Is it, or watching a particular Marvel film, or, you know, what is that? Is that something that we can pick up on? Do we look at their one-page profile? Do we actually use it? Is it relevant? Is it useful? Can we use that to build connections? And what is in your control? How do we reduce stress? I gave the example of a parent who would be told by the head teacher, you know, just get in when you can. How do we reduce our stress? And the most important thing we can do as adults is think about what is within our control as a parent, our control as a teacher, our control as a practitioner, because that's the only thing you can control. You know, we can't reinvent the school system, can we? We can't change all sorts of things, but we can think about what's within our control. So have a plan. If you know that you're going to be, as a parent, the sort of person that gets really stressed in the morning, then have a plan how you're going to manage that so you don't transmit that to your child. If you know that a autistic child always leaves your class, have a plan for how you're going to work towards them not needing to leave your class. What are you going to do about that? And two really important things: reduce the input wherever you can, and that is sensory input, including amount of words, and reduce demand. So try and create more of a low arousal environment. And that means you've also got to be in a state of low arousal. You have got to have a plan for being calm and for making sure that your interactions with either your autistic child or the autistic child in your class are based on you having a plan, for you being calm, and for you being prepared to take steps to reduce that input. Even something as simple about switching off the lights. In lots of classes, you don't need the lights on. They're on because people walk into a room and just go flick, 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 without even thinking about it. Rule number 10, wait until I stop attending regularly before offering me any support. You would not believe how often this happens, particularly with autistic young people who internalise. Suddenly, when it hits attendance statistics, you know, the official registration certificates statistics, that's suddenly when schools can start to take an interest. By that stage, it's often too late for some children. And I'm just going to show you this graph is 8 autistic girls that I work with. Again, their names are pseudonyms, and these are their official attendance figures from year 1 right through to year 11, and that black dotted line is the transition to secondary school, more or less. You can see the percentages up the left hand side. Different girls have got a different coloured line. You can see that most of them stop attending in year 8 or year 10. 2 of them it falls a little bit in primary school, and what this would suggest is that, and certainly if you look at the statistics nationwide, is that absence becomes a problem in secondary school. That would suggest that, wouldn't it, if we were just working on those statistics. However, from doing narrative research with these girls, we can say that actually that's not true. Issues with attendance start a lot earlier than that for most autistic children, young people, not because they're not necessarily in a good nurturing school, but because there are inherent difficulties for being in an environment that is presumably overwhelming with lots and lots of different people. If you actually have differences in the way that you interact with other people and the way that you process sensory information. So from my research of those 8 girls, half of them reported wanting to stop attending school within the first year, but persevered at school for 8 to 9 years before they finally stopped attending. There's some real examples of resilience. There were multiple examples of informal absences, so that's things like using their exit pass, or not being in school on the day that somebody went on a school trip, or not being in school when Ofsted came round. I'm not going to say anything else about that. In some cases, girls were almost entirely absent from lessons, despite being recorded as present in school. So a real issue there of those red flags again. How are we finding out what those warning flags are? There are these girls. It was far too late for one of those girls. She'd been in school, I think, almost all the time, but she was only in about 20% of her lessons at one period, and yet there was still nothing was being put in place. I'm sure that's an exceptional case, by the way, but the point still stands about, if they're absent from lessons, then what is being done to support them? Because that absence is an indicator that they're not surviving. Here's the example of the life chart that I talked to you about. So on the left-hand side, you've got a vertical column with good experiences going up and not so good going down. And it's a chronological line from left to right. And you can see here, Robin, again, not her real name, has identified lots and lots of different activities, lots of different events that were positive and negative. She's provided some themes on the right-hand side, and she's picked out, we did some picking out of works, like I showed you for Daisy. And you can see here the impact of a great teacher. So, you know, great teacher in year 2, in year 4, in year 6. Dropping French was a positive in year 7, and then things that which were less helpful, like a dressing up day, losing a tooth, change, unexpected change, a teacher making me look her in the eye, bullying, starting a period. You know, that was a really difficult event and experience for her. That change, she wasn't prepared for that change. So all of these different things are really helpful in us thinking, okay, so what was great about that? She really liked physical activity. She liked football. She liked swimming. So these are things that we could have built more things from. And rule 11, tell me there is no reason for my non-attendance. And I've actually seen that in a newsletter to parents just last week, actually, that somebody forwarded to me. There is no reason for your child not to be attending school. And I thought, what a silly thing to say, because clearly if they're not in school, there's a reason. You may not like the reason, but there will be a reason, even if it's because they can't be bothered. There is a reason. So saying that, it just, again, the message that children will interpret from that is, you're never going to believe me. You're not that interested. You think I'm a bad person. You think you think I'm not interested in learning. And all of that is really unhelpful in helping a child who's not attending to attend. So we need an experienced, sensitive approach. We need to recognise that autistic children and young people are often stigmatised at school or within their own community. We know some communities find autism is very heavily stigmatised, particularly in some ethnic communities, so globally ethnic majority communities. They maybe have been labelled as odd or weird or disordered. You know, we use identity first language in our community, so most people prefer I am autistic rather than a person with autism. You know, there's a colleague, John Adams, who always says I don't live with autism, I live with my wife. So identity led, do ask the person though, because we're all different. A lot of us have been misdiagnosed, maybe as anxious with an anxiety disorder or depression. Quite often, autistic girls in particular identified first of all with an eating disorder before they're diagnosed as autistic. Black autistic boys quite often diagnosed with a conduct disorder rather than as autistic. Many have experienced multiple microaggressions over time. So having been bullied, maybe bullied on a daily basis, maybe being excluded, maybe being ignored, having their needs overlooked. And they've internalized a lot of these attitudes and values, even those that have not been given to them intentionally, even those with well-intentioned school staff, as you've seen today, may have resulted in difficult messages being internalized, and a result may have stress or low self-esteem or poor mental health. So don't say there is no reason why these autistic children are not in school, because if they're not, there's typically a very good reason. And they may not be attending because they feel that's the only way to protect their mental health. The girls in my study, they were not rejecting learning. They were rejecting a toxic environment. They all wanted to be in school learning. They wanted to be blending in, not hiding, but being part of it all, being relaxed, accepted. They wanted to feel safe, comfortable to be themselves, their autistic, authentic identity, and they wanted to be learning. So the other Padlet that I'm going to put in the chat for you to do in a short while is thinking about what changes can you make. And that's all of you, whether you are a parent or a carer or work in a school or you're a practitioner in some other way. Think about what is within your control. What are the things you can do? What are the small things you can do? And that was the best photo I could find at the last minute. I was trying to find ripples, because I'm a firm believer in ripples of change. We don't need to make massive changes to have an impact. We can make small changes. And as I say, it can be something small like saying hello to that child as they come through the door. It may be, as a parent, when you greet your autistic child as they leave school, not saying, how was your day? What do you do for lunch? What would you like for dinner? Da, 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 da. You actually go, right, okay, I know that child is probably close to a meltdown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have had a plan from the night before that after school, we're going to go to the playground and they're going to have a run around. I'm just going to give them some food. I'm not going to speak to them. And I'm going to wait for them to actually decompress and regulate themselves before we do that. So there are all sorts of things that we can all do. We think about our situation and what we do, where we live, and the interactions we have. What are the small changes we can make to make sure that the messages we give are feeding that narrative of safety and connection and belonging, and seeking to make sure that they thrive. I'm going to share a ready-made Padlet, which is a live addable to Padlet, which is full of, I don't know where that came from. It's full of resources that you can use, made mainly by autistic people. Lots of different headings along the top there. Animation, stories, illustrations. It's fabulous. And thank you. I have no idea what that's saying there. It's really annoying me now. So with thanks to the 10 Rules book from Damien and Richard Mills. That's my email address there on my Twitter handle. So you're very welcome to contact me at any time if you like. And finally, any questions?
Lovely, thank you so much. I've been going through the chat and there's been a few kind of questions along the way. So I'll start with those ones, and if anyone's got any others, you can add to the chat or shout out once we've gone through these. So first one, somebody said masking is what my 4-year-old does. Schools say he's fine. And I know otherwise, with him feeling unable to go to school. My child's 4 years old. How is it possible to mask, internalize so much at 4 years old?
Gosh, that's a good question.
Mhm.
I think it's sorry, I'm trying to multitask.
Yeah,
I'll put
sorry.
that. It's fine. Remind me, Rebecca, that I need to put a link in
Padlet, is it?
Padlet thing in there, but it's in white text, so you can't see it.
Okay.
I don't know. That's a very good question. So I have no idea what the answer to that question is. Why would you be able to mask at the age of 4? I guess I don't know. Can't answer that one for you, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And I suppose it's just so much of what you've been saying, really, that you're just not feeling that sense of belonging and acceptance and things in their school setting potentially. So one's kind of sort of direct one to you about saying my son's 15, was abusive towards me and then his dad from the ages of 12 to 14. All started due to school anxiety and stress of secondary school. Now in year 10, he stopped being physically abusive, but is still abusive when he's extremely stressed. What can we do? Can we get your details? Are you under the NHS or private?
I am, okay, so I'm not a therapist. That's the first thing I want to say. So I don't work, although so I'm not a therapist, so I don't work directly. I don't work in private practice. I'm a trainer, I'm a consultant, and the only NHS work, I say the only NHS work, I'm a co-lead on a national autism trainer program. We're actually at the moment developing and delivering autism training to the NHS workforce who work with autistic people in inpatient settings and all age community settings, including CAMS. I think one of the experience that you've described is sadly not uncommon, of when you are struggling, when your young person is struggling, they very much can use that distress on you because you are a safe place to be. And if you don't know what else to do with it, then parents may get it, or a parent sometimes gets it. And that is really, really hard, isn't it? That's really hard as a parent to bear, because as a parent, you want to fix things, you want to make things better, you want to remove the pain from them, and it feels hurtful to have that pain turned to you. And I guess what I would say in that scenario is unconditional positive regard. That is, however hard it is, keep saying that you love them. Keep saying that you will be there for them, and you want to help them if you can, and you know you don't have the answers, but you are there, and you will always be there. And eventually they will get through that. It's a really hard one, because once you're going through it, and I know lots of parents that I've worked with that have gone through that, and what do you do? What do you do when you just, there are times, I guess, when it's so hard you don't know how to do anything, you don't know what to do. But the thing you most want to do, I suppose, is you have to validate them. You have to, don't try and problem solve, because you can't always problem solve. That's not always what they need. But that unconditional positive regard, knowing that you love them, however tough it is so important. And that, yeah, that's the most important thing you can do. And give it time. And time is hard. And make sure that you as a parent have got a space to go and someone to talk to that's not necessarily your partner, because you need to keep a relationship going. You need to find time not to talk about it, but make sure you've got someone you can talk to, so that you can keep giving that unconditional positive regard to your child, and you can keep reminding them that this will pass and that you love them, and it's okay. You hear what they say, and that's okay. You will always love them.
And I think as well, when you said at the start of that you're not a therapist, if you are looking for somebody to work with your young person, I know a lot of autistic adults have said that the benefits of having neurodivergent or autistic therapists themselves, so that they've gone through, maybe similar experiences and can also help with that sense of belonging. So that might be something you want to search for.
Really good point. Yeah.
So another one, what suggestion do you have to help teenagers who feel isolated at school among their peers? What can schools do to support students? My child wants an education, but the effort of being alone all day is too much. Any ideas?
Yeah, okay. So I would go through, so for me, I think one of the most important things that schools can do is modeling different ways of having those interactions. So things like finding out what their particular interest is. Can we have, are there ways of setting up interactions that are based around that particular interest? It depends what it is, obviously, but if you so a lot of autistic people don't actually like, I mean some do, don't actually want massive groups of friends. They want to have meaningful conversations. For me, I don't like lots of small talk. I like efficient information transfer. That's, give me the information I need. Great, fabulous. I'll put a smile on my face. I don't need to know what you had for dinner last night. That's just me. So for me, communication's got to be meaningful. So it would be about finding out what is it they're really interested in. What does it that gives them some sort of sense of social capital? Are they into Marvel films, for example? Is there something there that the school is there a special interest group? And I use that because I'm using it in a non-pejorative way. I don't like the term special interest, but rather like a club, like opportunities for them to do the things that they are good at, that they love, that they enjoy, that they know they're going to be accepted doing, and it's going to be enjoyable for them. Don't try and force interactions with people that aren't going to get them.
And you can get creative with that as well. I think I've supported schools in the past where a young person might have quite a niche interest, but there's somebody at another school who's got one. So now with Zoom, you can set up, sessions like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same school.
Absolutely.
So
it's a really good idea.
I think there's a couple sort of similar ones here. So one saying, how about schools saying that the reason for not attending is that autistic children lack social understanding and don't understand the point of going to school? And then another person saying,
I would say they need to get their school needs some autism training.
Yeah. And which is available. There's quite a lot of training around, so that is something that could be suggested. Young person I spoke to today says he doesn't see the point of school. He wants to be a footballer, year 9. School have tried lots. What else can you suggest?
Well, again, without really meeting him, it's tricky, isn't it? But I think I would be encouraging a kind of, I don't know about what you think, Rebecca, but I would be encouraging him to actually go with that interest, but also to give him lots of opportunities to do the thing that he's interested in, because that's going to keep his well-being high, but also alongside that, develop some of those other academic things as well, so that he has options. I think that's the thing about having that some exams are really important to try and get under your belt. The English, the maths, the science. We know that's the thing. I would say is that maybe you don't need to have. So, for example, if your child is out of school completely, maybe you don't need to do all of those things at the same time and in the same order. That's something to hold on to.
Mm.
And in terms, we also, we're very quick, I think, when somebody says I want to be a professional footballer, to go, oh, don't be ridiculous, that's never going to happen. And I think that in itself can lead to difficulties with having those conversations about what is possible and what is helpful in terms of that hybrid mix moving forwards. It could actually lead to him just going, well, if you're not going to listen to me, stuff it, I'm not going to do anything to do with school. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Just to follow up from the suggestion of autism training, somebody said, what if it's an SEN school that says it has autism training? This is the challenge.
I would, that's really difficult, isn't it? I would be speaking to maybe the local authority, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And potentially there's always a system in schools, you know, whether it's the Senko going to the head, going to the board of governors, like I said, local
Yeah.
authority, sometimes local MPs, things like that as well.
Yeah.
Where can you get support if school insist on attendance no matter what and punish for lateness? Feel there needs to be an emergency service that is on board with these issues to help parents and young people.
Okay, I probably, I think somebody's already mentioned SENDIAS in the chat. I would definitely be looking to SENDIAS to mediate initially with that. I would also, and this might be quite a hard comment to say, but I would also be looking at whether that's the right school for my child to be in, if they're struggling to attend, and that's the, if the school is that inflexible, I wonder about the school's ability to meet your child's needs. But start with SENDIAS.
Another one, is a flexible or part-time timetable appropriate when I as a parent struggle with this? Would alternative provision be better to investigate?
Again, I mean, it's a who knows? It depends on you and your child, isn't it? If you are not going to be able to manage a part-time timetable, then that's one thing. Maybe your child, but it's about thinking about your own personal situation, thinking about your child's needs, and then working together with the authority to find out, with the local authority, to find out what is going to meet that child's needs the best. And I can't say that over a webinar, I'm afraid, because I don't know you, but yes, I'm not here saying this is what you must do. You must do a part-time timetable. I'm giving you examples of different things people have done to try and A, listen to the voice of the child, B, focus on their well-being, and C, be more creative about ways of managing non-attendance and increasing attendance. So maybe that's something you need to go and look at with your child. What might work? What options have you got available to you? That's another thing to think about, isn't it? I know some children who some children love working in an online situation, and we know this from COVID, and some autistic children absolutely hated it. So again, there's no one answer. It's about what works for your child and your family.
Thank you. I think that is everything. There's just a couple of questions about whether people could have access to the slides afterwards.
Yes, that's fine.
So you can send them to me and I can send them out. It might be the end of the week or next week now, just because we've got a lot of different events on this week. Some people missed your email as well, so I don't know if you're able to put that in the chat as well as the Padlet link, because I don't think it worked. It came up as a picture, the last one.
Yes, I have to do both of those things. Let me put my...
and somebody else has rightly flagged up, going back to the SEND Code of Practice and Equality Act, which is the kind of legal requirement for all settings to make reasonable adjustments. So it's sometimes helpful just to kind of refer back to that, but it can feel like a bit of a battle sometimes.
Yes, that absolutely should be the port of call, is to, the Equality Act says you need to make reasonable adjustments, the law says you need to make reasonable adjustments. Unfortunately, I have had schools say, well, that's all well and good, but this is our school and we'll do what we like.
Nice.
So
it's tricky as well to know, one person's judgment of reasonable is not another's. So it's all a bit, it can be tricky.
Absolutely. And I think, again, that's why we come back to that idea of collaboration. If we kind of end up in a situation where we're kind of like battle lines drawn, we don't really make any progress, and the person that's going to suffer is the child in the middle. So whilst bearing in mind that the school that said we don't actually care about the Equality Act, we've got our own school rules, thank you very much, it's probably at the far end of that. I think if we can start from a position of how do we collaborate, how do we, in a school, how do we actually get people, get parents to come in and feel welcome and feel like we're going to listen to them? Because we're the ones in a position of power. How do we change that? Do we need skills ourselves as teachers to be able to have those collaborative conversations? You know, it is more complicated than just saying let's collaborate, but I think, you know, having divisions between us is not helpful in moving forwards.
No, and I think that is it, like you were saying before about team around the child meeting, or requesting kind of just having everyone in the room together, because sometimes it is just about time. I think a lot of the time teachers do really want to help, but they just may not have the ideas or haven't got the time for everyone to kind of be together thinking of things, information sharing.
And remembering that the child needs to be at the centre of all of this with their voice heard. Yeah,
definitely. Lovely. Well, there's lots of lovely feedback as well. People saying it's been very useful, thought-provoking. And a few people have asked about wanting, you know, other people to be able to view it. So this is being recorded, so it will be available from the Cognos YouTube channel, again, probably at the end of this week or start of next week. So that's something that I'll send you the link for to be able to share as well with your colleagues. But yeah, thank you very much, Ruth. It's been really interesting and very useful, I'm sure.
Pleasure.
Okay, take care, everybody. Thank you.